Hello, and welcome to United Facts of America. I'm Katie Sanders, the editor-in-chief of PolitiFact. United Facts is a fact-checking festival hosted by PolitiFact and the Poynter Institute. This is our third annual Festival of Fact-Checking, timed just under a year from the November 5th, 2024 presidential election. And this year, for the first time, we made the event completely free. Thanks to all of our supporters for making that possible. In a little over a year, we'll be closer to knowing which party will control the White House, the House of Representatives, and the U.S. Senate. I don't want to say we'll definitely know because, well, we all remember what happened in 2020 and 2022. We should know the outcome of former President Donald Trump's various criminal trials, and we will know if other factors will shape the race, such as the candidate's age and trustworthiness, as well as new conflict between Israel and Hamas. Of course, let's not get ahead of ourselves. There is still a lot of election to go. And actually, tomorrow is an election day, an off-year election day in some states. So we have a great lineup of 8 easy sessions that will help you better understand the core issues of this campaign. You'll get an inside look at how PolitiFact's journalists plan to cover the race, including the GOP presidential debate, the third one on Wednesday night. Today, coming up, you'll hear from political director of ABC News, Rick Klein, about the 2024 landscape and a potential rematch between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And then at 11 a.m. Eastern, we'll talk to Dr. Celine Gounder, an infectious diseases expert, podcast host, TV analyst, who found herself in the middle of an anti-vaccine conspiracy theory during one of her life's most painful moments. And we'll finish day one with an expert's look at how Russian propaganda fools U.S. audiences by disguising as local news. We'll teach you how to spot it so you don't get fooled. I will see you again Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern when I interview Sarah Longwell, an expert on voter attitudes through her focus groups and advocacy work. To kick us off, we have PolitiFact senior correspondent Louis Jacobson interviewing Rick Klein of ABC. Lou, take it away.
Thanks, Katie, and welcome to United Facts of America. I'm Lou Jacobson. I'm a senior correspondent at PolitiFact. It's a pleasure to welcome to our Festival of Facts a man who I once sold a portion of my baseball card collection to, Rick Klein, the political director at ABC News. We'll be talking today about what you can expect to see during the race for president in 2024. I'll be kicking off our conversation with Rick with some questions of my own, but the folks who are watching this will be able to ask questions of their own later in the session. If you're watching us right now on YouTube, please leave your questions in the chat. So Rick, just a bit of background about you before we start. Rick has been the political director for ABC News since 2013. He oversees political reporting, polling, and data analysis, and helps steer the network's coverage of major news events. He also appears on air for all ABC News broadcasts and platforms. Previously, Rick covered Congress and state, local, and national politics for the Boston Globe. Before that, he worked for the Dallas Morning News. Let me start by asking Rick about the presidential race. Give us some historical perspective in what ways the 2024 election is defying the usual historical patterns.
Thank you, Lou, and thank you for that introduction. And yes, for the audience, it is true that I bought a good chunk of Lou's baseball cards. So that's my real passion and what I'm really into when I'm not doing political stuff. But yeah, 2024 has been an unusual year in a lot of ways. I mean, we've got a race that, a year out, the country is really not engaged in or excited about. We had polling out yesterday with our partners at Ipsos that talked about the disapproval of kind of the direction of the country right now, but also the disapproval of the two leading candidates. And the fact that even though votes haven't even been cast and won't be cast for 2 more months, people generally have a very negative view of both of the leading candidates and are indicating in polls and elsewhere that they'd rather have more choices, even though that's obviously within the grasp of voters. That doesn't seem to be the dynamic right now. We have the extraordinary spectacle of the front-running Republican candidate and former president who is going to be appearing in court throughout this campaign, is already facing 4 different sets of charges, and is going to be testifying even today while Ron DeSantis is in Iowa. He's in New York testifying in a civil fraud trial. So that's one level of it. We also have the age of the two candidates, which is unprecedented. Either this is setting new records in terms of age for both sides, and it's something that's obviously on voters' minds. The calls for Biden to step aside are fairly unprecedented, but I think attached a little bit to the age question. I think, and I've said this now for the last at least 8 years, if not more, that as journalists we have to embrace the uncertainty and just kind of be ready for whatever's going to come, because there are so many things that are happening that are unprecedented. And every time we've seen something that you think, well, that's never happened before, that happens. Capitol Hill and the new speaker who was ousted just a few weeks ago, or was installed a few weeks ago after the ousting of Kevin McCarthy, that was unprecedented. And I think also the amount of misinformation, disinformation, outright lies, yes, but also a lot of actors who are entering into the arena. We've never had a campaign where AI tools were as readily available and accessible as they are now. It's a lot easier to do deep fakes and to try to trick us, for fun reasons as well as not fun reasons. So the challenges, I think, that we face as journalists are also unprecedented, and just kind of layer on top of all the other wild things that we're gearing up for.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And on the AI point, I mean, it's a good one. Fortunately, I don't think we've seen a ton of it so far in the presidential race. We've seen it perhaps in international events, but in terms of the presidential race, I'm not seeing a ton of that. Are you?
No, I mean, and fortunately, again, when it has come out, it's been labeled as such. It's usually an attempt to just kind of get people to pay attention to it. But I'm convinced that there's going to be efforts to use deep fakes to try to manipulate. I mean, there's certainly been instances already where there's deceptive editing. That's not really new in this world. It's just gotten a lot easier to do it and do it really well. There was an example that the Republican National Committee put out, which was a AI generated imagery imagining Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in 2025. They labeled it as such, so we could label it as such. There was a use, the DeSantis, I think it was the DeSantis PAC that used technology to put Trump's voice to words that had been written, that were just basically in a tweet or a True Social posting. No, the context of that is important. Obviously, it wasn't real, but at least they admitted it. But there's not going to be any regulation on this pretty clearly from Congress. I don't expect that the FEC is going to be able to break any deadlocks on this and find a way to regulate it. So it's really going to fall on us as journalists, as reporters who care about the facts and the truth, to find and then label any information that comes across the transom that isn't exactly what it purports to be.
Do you get the sense that, staying on the fact checking and sort of truth and lies part of it, do you get the sense that presidential candidates today care about getting things right, or is it more about what the base will respond positively to?
Yeah, I have to say, Lou, this is one area where I feel like I've seen a shift in my time in journalism. It wasn't always the case, and I've had a lot of fights and been part of a lot of disagreements as to what's true and what's not. But generally speaking, when for the first 15 years or so of my career, if reputable fact checkers credibly pointed out that something that was said was false, you would see, you'd see them stop saying it or change how they say it, generally speaking. That has changed. And I think the use of the term fake news to dispute information that a candidate or a campaign feels like is not convenient. Clearly it's been a major point that the former president has used to try to, to bolster his own following. And to your point, Lou, it's often just what the base will tolerate or accept, which, takes some like mind twisting turns over time. I've also, I know that PolitiFact's done work on this, and others have, pointing out factual inaccuracies or inconsistencies in things President Biden has said. I think President Biden and the White House care more about it, but he has continued to say things that are flatly false, and said so by fact checkers, and even admitted by his campaign to be false. You can,
especially about biographical details.
Yeah, the verifiable.
It's almost like an old-fashioned style of politics where you're just spinning yarns, and a story is too good to check.
I think that's exactly right. And I think, the motivations of it may be, less nefarious in that sense, but a fact is a fact. And, if it's not true and it's being described as such, that's, so that's not okay in my book. And it's right to be called out. You're right. I mean, I think, lies, exaggerations, half truths have been with us as long as politicians have been making arguments to voters, for sure. And, I think one of the challenges we have as journalists is also, kind of divining or trying to unpack the spirit of or the meaning of some things that are said that aren't 100% true. When it's not our job to read minds on these things, and if something is said that isn't true, we should call it out. But I think the son of the fact checking has been weaponized by people who lie about things as well, and that to me is a newer development where you'll have candidates and campaigns who almost brag about the fact that a fact checker called them out on something and use it to further undermine trust in the media institutions. So that is new, and it's a new forefront, and it's as I think the audience here can imagine, it makes it extraordinarily difficult to try to communicate with an audience. If people are just going to think or inclined to think that what we're saying is fake anyway, then there really isn't any amount of fact checking that's going to convince them otherwise. That's what makes that, I think, particularly an insidious phrase when fake news is bandied about by anyone who just doesn't disagree with or finds a fact to be inconvenient more than anything else.
Yeah, and it's very hard, for me, as a fact checker in politics, if people just sort of have a knee-jerk response to us, you're wrong. Like, I'm not going to engage with somebody who doesn't have an open mind. I will definitely engage with people who do have open minds and try to convince them. But there's a section of the people who are reading our stuff who just cannot be convinced. And I could bang my head against the wall all day and never make any progress. So I have to really pick and choose the battles that I fight.
I think I choose not to fight most of them in a public forum for that reason. I think, 10 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, I think I was engaging more with people who made commentary on social media. And I rarely see the upside of that anymore, because I don't think most people who are on there anymore or trying to engage anymore want to have an honest conversation. They want a gotcha moment, or they want to believe a narrative. This just in the last 24 hours, there was some conservative pollsters or kind of polling analysts who have been peddling a theory that we changed our pollster based on the fact that the last poll we had was a pretty good one for Donald Trump. First of all, our poll yesterday was pretty good it was pretty bad for Joe Biden anyway. But secondly, we've been polling with this partner Ipsos for 5 years now, and and I made maybe the mistake of responding to one person who was asking about it, and he's still claiming that I'm not answering his question. And it's just it is bang your head against the wall type stuff, like you said, Lou. And I think we all have to just calibrate our expectations a little bit. And I'm willing to engage and want to engage with members of audience or campaigns or players in this that want to actually have a conversation. I'm happy to have the discussion, but I don't think that's really the intent of most of the people that are reaching me, at least via social media.
Yeah, I should mention thank you to ABC News for partnering with us on the debates. We do something approaching live fact checking on the debate blog, and so you guys are trying to do some fact checking in that context. Speaking of the debate, I was wondering what you think the value of the debates have been, and in fact, the one coming up on Wednesday, and what you think the candidates need to do to sort of break out of this situation where Trump is up by double-digit points in the national polls.
Yeah, I think my thinking, to putting the analyst hat on this, has evolved a little bit over time, and I don't think that any of the candidates can realistically expect that a debate is going to be how they take down Donald Trump or change perceptions around Donald Trump. Certainly not as long as he's not there, and he won't be there again. And I don't anticipate that he's going to show up at least until the voting starts or is closer to the voting. But I think the campaign has sort of developed into Trump versus Trump, and if the legal woes that he's facing and all of the questions swirling around him kind of put him in his own category, and then the battle to be the Trump alternative. And I think I expect it to be 5 candidates on stage tomorrow or Wednesday. I think the goal for those 5 is going to be kind of emerge from this side of the bracket against Trump in what would you'd anticipate to be the finals. And the finals will be Iowa and New Hampshire, and then off and running. And I think if Trump wins Iowa and New Hampshire, he's very, very likely to be the nominee. If he loses one or both, it's going to be a real contest. And if the person to break through in Iowa or New Hampshire is Nikki Haley or Tim Scott or Ron DeSantis, you're going to see a wave of support kind of flow their way. And I'd anticipate that the field narrows in that direction. So in some ways, you can't really have an honest debate about who the Republican nominee is going to be as long as Trump isn't there. But I don't know that there's going to be another way for them to do it other than to kind of survive that side of the bracket where they're taking on people who themselves don't have a huge amount. I mean, Mike Pence getting out of the race a week or so ago might be the first major name to drop. I'd anticipate there'll be others even before the voting starts. That's certainly what past experience would predict. But I don't think. I mean, now this is the 3rd debate that we're going to have without the front runner. I don't know what or how that's going to make a very vastly new dynamic that shakes this up. I think the candidates are trying to survive and keep viability and financing alive until they get to a point where they can take him on, and that may not be until the voting starts in Iowa. But I'd also say that the history of this has shown us many times that things are very unpredictable once the voting starts. Ted Cruz and his victory in 2016, Rick Santorum's victory in 2012, Mike Huckabee in 2008. These were upsets that happened very late. Go back to the Democrats and John Kerry in 2004. Weird things happen late, and you kind of just need to be part of the conversation for it to happen. And everything we think we know about Iowa and New Hampshire now is liable to change in the next 2 months.
Yeah. So you think maybe 4 or 5 candidates compete in Iowa, maybe 2 or 3 come out of Iowa to fight on in New Hampshire, and then when does it get down to Trump versus non-Trump? At what point does that happen?
I think really quickly after New Hampshire. I mean, I think there is a scenario where Trump wins both, and I don't even know that there is a viable option after that. Maybe one person can try to fly the flag till Super Tuesday, but I think it's really quickly. I think if one of the people I just mentioned wins Iowa and Trump comes in second, I think you're going to see that person emerge as the viable real alternative. And if it's not the case, and if it stays to be a five-way race, I think the polling on this has been pretty consistent that Trump benefits the most from it, from the rest of the vote getting split up. But the big caveat on all of this is all of the uncertainties that were talked about, and the fact that there's a lot of external events that could be happening as well, up to and including all of the legal issues that he continues to sort through, and it's not so much that it distracts him from the trail, but certainly it's something that can weigh on voters' minds as to whether this is a good idea or not. And you've seen Chris Christie, out of the remaining candidates, has been most outspoken about what he views as the big mistake of nominating Trump, but others, including DeSantis and Haley, have talked about the distraction or the problem with potentially nominating someone who stands accused and or convicted of various federal crimes.
Yeah. Just a note to those who may have just tuned in, I'm speaking to Rick Klein, who is the political director at ABC News. If you'd like to submit a question at the YouTube comments, please do, and it'll be passed along to me. One thing that sort of fascinated me is the idea that no Democrat has really challenged Biden, despite his very weak approval ratings. Why didn't somebody with bigger stature than Dean Phillips challenge Biden in the primaries? Could a Cory Booker or a Jared Polis or a Gavin Newsom have said, look, I love Joe Biden. I have nothing against him. I agree with 95% of his policies, but we just need, a choice. And say, I'm not going to attack him personally. I just think that the primary voters for this party need to have a choice. Why didn't that happen?
Yeah, I kind of thought it would, and I thought the dynamics would be a little closer to what we saw in 2015, where basically everyone in the Democratic Party thought Hillary Clinton was going to be the nominee, but you saw Martin O'Malley and Bernie Sanders give it a try and try to be an alternative, and it wasn't an overtly negative campaign that either of the other candidates that survived a little while made. Obviously, Sanders got a lot closer, probably closer than he even thought he would, but at least changed the conversation, changed the issue set. I thought we would see maybe something like that from an ambitious governor or senator. To your point, Dean Phillips is sort of a wild card in this, and obviously doesn't have much national name recognition. He's also, as of now, not even on the ballot anywhere that would actually get him a delegate. So it really is,
and also relatively inexperienced. He's only had a couple terms in Congress.
That's right. So yeah, but I think, and I've talked to some of the people that you just mentioned and some of their campaign staffers, and I think, look, first of all, they'll tell you on the record or off the record, they think Joe Biden's done a good job and deserves a second term. And it's kind of hard to run against someone when that's your core belief. They recognize his age, they recognize his approval ratings, and they recognize the frustration out there. I think there's a political calculation that goes into it as well, where if you go up against at least the perception is if you go up against the incumbent president, you're weakening him politically. And if, or more likely when you lose the nomination, you are then a diminished figure in the party. So if you're a 40 or 50 something year old Democratic governor or senator who knows that there will be a future on the other side of Joe Biden, you sort of wait it out. And, right. You make plans to run in 2028 when Biden will be, term limited or out of office and people are ready to move on. I think another big factor on this is Vice President Harris. And, I think her relative weakness in the polls is a piece of it. But I think one reason that you don't see that we haven't seen a Biden challenger, frankly, is that that Harris is there as the running mate, and for a lot of personal and political reasons, not wanting to be seen as going up against the history of Harris and kind of jumping the line ahead of her. Look, Democrats have been fairly disciplined at kind of getting in line, and I think the 2020 election was a case in point where Biden came in like fourth or fifth in Iowa and New Hampshire, and then romped in South Carolina, and then right ahead of Super Tuesday, when it looked like Bernie Sanders could potentially become the nominee, you saw a whole range of more moderate Democrats like Klobuchar and Buttigieg get out kind of on a dime and fall behind Biden and seal it for him. That's not easy to do, and in some ways it sort of happened earlier this time around. And Biden does have the one thing going for him is that he's the one person that can say he beat Trump once already. And, Trump in a weird way makes the argument for Biden stronger. Biden in a weird way makes the argument for Trump on the other side stronger, even as unpopular as both of them are, even as much as the country doesn't want to see either of them run. I don't know exactly what the analogy is, but they're like, two old gunslingers that are, coming out for one more. Right. And, but I agree with you, Lou. I am surprised that no one of a higher national political stature, at least got close to the starting line on this. It's Marianne Williamson, who made a debate stage in the last cycle, but isn't someone with vast experience. Bobby Kennedy Jr. got in early as a Democrat, but he's now switched to becoming to running an independent campaign. And now Congressman Phillips is someone that's emerged. I thought, it would be someone different. It's now very late for that. I mean, filing deadlines have already started to come and go. It becomes almost impossible to imagine happening, just as a practical, logistical matter, even if one of the individuals that you talked about were suddenly to have that epiphany and wake up today and see the New York Times Siena poll and say, wow, we need to do something about this. It's late. It's frankly too late to do that credibly or viably, unless or until Biden decides he's not running, and which would open it up.
Yeah. So do you expect there to be a drop off in enthusiasm because of Biden's low approval ratings and sort of concern over his age that could make 2024 look more like 2016 than 2020, where there was much more of a focus that Democrats are really focused on getting Trump out of there, which could mean lower turnout on the Democratic side and greater support for third parties, kind of weakening the Democratic vote totals. And if so, is that a big problem for Biden?
I think that's a bigger concern than Biden Trump voters, because I don't think there's that many people who voted for Biden last time that are ready to vote for Trump the next time. And the polling's a little mixed on this, and I caution people when you read polling to be very to be smart about how you read it and be skeptical of what it means. We ask hypothetical questions. Who, if the election were today, who would you vote for? Well, the election isn't today, and people don't get to vote. And how they answer a poll could be different than who they may be telling the truth and who they would vote for, but that's not, they can't predict what their future mindset's going to be, what the future situation is going to be. They may just be venting to a pollster, and there's some evidence that's emerged in some polls that people, when it's a free shot like that, to say I'm not voting for Biden because I'm frustrated because gas prices are high. That's different than actually voting for Donald Trump. So I think a bigger concern, to your point, is the drop off in enthusiasm, which might manifest itself in lower turnout in certain communities and Biden's weakness among voters of color, younger voters. It's no question that those are real problems that he's facing. And then maybe flirtations with a third party, and Cornel West, Robert Kennedy Jr., and the No Labels movement, which is planning on potentially having a unity ticket that they put forward. All of those are suddenly, viable alternatives if they're on a lot of ballots, and it might hurt different segments of voters in different ways. But I think Donald Trump pretty clearly has a stronger, floor than really anyone in politics, and
also a lower ceiling probably too.
Maybe a lower ceiling as well, but yes, but to the point that if we're talking about a lower turnout overall, that Trump would be better equipped to take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. Notwithstanding some of the low propensity voters he's gotten out, they are very much with him. But I'm also compelled by the argument that we're in an era where everyone is so hyped up around politics that low turnout elections kind of don't exist anymore, whether they're local or state level. Obviously, it's not the same as a big presidential one, but people know the stakes. And I'm quite convinced that a year from yesterday, with Election Day 2024, by that time, people will be fully engaged with the choices in front of them in a much more comprehensive way than they are right now. And that's not to say that the results will be different than any of the polls. I don't know that, but I think when a full campaign is played out, that's when you can really tell if people are enthusiastic or not. The signs right now, a year out, of Democrats being down on Biden and more than Republicans are down, say, on Trump or on their nominees are true, but the issue set's going to be different once a full campaign is prosecuted. And I know there's a lot of Democrats that are eager to get into a general election, that get into the flaws of Donald Trump, remind people about why they rejected him in his reelection bid, as well as rebuked him in congressional races in both 18 and 22. Remind people of his actions on and around January 6th and the other things that could still land him a conviction.
Yeah, I mean, conversely, for Trump, I would think that probably the biggest challenge is he's going to have a bunch of trials between now and then. So his name is going to be in the headlines in a way that it's not necessarily right now, and Biden's is, because he's president. Yep. And there are big things happening right now. And then also, we recently did a piece on 27 of the campaign promises of the Trump second term campaign, which include some fairly radical ideas, and that would seem to provide some grist for the Biden side to really sort of energize Democratic voters and say, look, this is what we're facing. This is why you have to vote. Is that fair?
Oh, 100%. And I think, the Biden team that I've been talking to about this, when they see polls now, right now, they realize, look, right now, it's a referendum on Joe Biden. They would like to turn it into a referendum on Trump and MAGA Republicans. And to that point, pointing out what he would actually do, what he said he would do, what he did in the past, all becomes very relevant. And that really hasn't happened. I think voters tend to have a shorter attention span, and if the pollster catches you, it's a snapshot in time anyway. And people aren't going around every day thinking about how Donald Trump did his job 4 years ago. They are thinking a lot more about how Joe Biden is doing his job now. And in a campaign, that changes. And the Biden team will point you to polling a year out that had Obama in a tough spot, or Bill Clinton in a tough spot, or George W. Bush in a tough spot, and recognize that a lot of things change once you're fully engaged in a campaign. And most of the most recent presidents have had a lot of tough spots, and most of them have come back and rallied somewhat. And maybe that's not in the cards for Biden, but I don't think there's anything in today's headlines that that makes it an automatic either way.
Right. What's the impact of the war in the Middle East on the presidential race?
I think it's scrambled some of the political alliances. It clearly has, makes Democrats a little more uncomfortable with their direction of leadership. There's an immediate political impact that a lot of Muslim voters and others who might associate with pro-Palestinian causes, progressive left included, might be soured on Joe Biden's leadership. I'm not convinced that we've seen the end of that either. I mean, I think everything that goes on in Israel now has a chance to further divide politics back here. We've already seen some signs of that, but this is going to be a while. It's only a month old, and I think it's going to get a lot worse. I think the anti-Semitic attacks and the kind of stirrings of anti-Semitism here are problematic, and it's a leadership opportunity for Biden, who I think has, some of his speeches about the war against Hamas and with Israel have been striking for their moral clarity. That's hard to do over time. It also, there's a kind of immediate congressional side of it, of is the funding going to come? Is what kind of resolutions you can have? Congress was paralyzed for a few weeks while they didn't have a speaker. The first effort out of the box by Speaker Johnson to take the money from IRS funding to Israel, I don't think was a real serious effort to make something into law. And I think his members knew it, but they needed to do that to kind of, from an initial positioning. But, it's not clear that Speaker Johnson's in a position of any strength, given how chaotic the House has been.
Exactly.
So, all of which is a long way of saying we don't really know. I think, anytime a president gets a chance to be commander in chief and to show, a striking degree of leadership on something, that's good. But this happens to be an area that Democrats are more divided than Republicans. You toss in the Russia, Ukraine, you toss in China, Taiwan. There's so many different national security issues that can disrupt, a year from now. I don't know that it's possible to handicap, but the immediate fallout, I think, again, kind of strains Democrats, many of whom have already been, a little bit down on the current president.
Right. I'll just repeat a note to those who may have just tuned in. I'm speaking with Rick Klein, who is the political director of ABC News. If you'd like to submit a question, please do at our YouTube channel comments. So we have an election tomorrow, a relatively small one by all standards. One of the biggest issues on the ballot is in Ohio about abortion, protecting abortion rights, a ballot measure. Voter concern about rolling back abortion rights has been a pretty consistent factor aiding Democrats. Is this something that you think will continue to help Democrats, or will this, maybe because of all the other news happening, might move down the list?
Yeah, I mean, Ohio is a very clear they have a couple of referendums, another one on marijuana legalization, but this one on that would codify a right to an abortion in the state constitution is, more clear than most. But the Virginia legislative elections have been framed as determining the future of abortion rights in the last state in the South that allows abortion as widely available. Governor Youngkin has a 15-week bill with some limits, 15-week abortion ban with some limits built into it that clearly will move ahead if Republicans win control of both both chambers of the legislature in Richmond. And even in Kentucky, where abortion is largely banned, the Democratic governor there is campaigning against that, even if he has no realistic chance of changing that in a very Republican state. So we're seeing it continue to animate these races, and I think it's going to be, a big issue in targeted places over the next year. I'm sure in Ohio, the organizers there would love to have this on the ballot at the same time that Senator Brown is up for re-election, at the same time the presidential election is going on. There are efforts to move to the ballot in states including Arizona and Florida on abortion rights, which could impact it. We polled on this in our poll with Ipsos that I mentioned earlier, Lou, that voters aren't prioritizing, at least saying right now that abortion rights are as important to them personally as inflation or the economy. But we also know that it has the potential to really be a galvanizing and motivating issue. And I saw the memo that the Biden campaign put out about the year ahead and how they're planning to make the case against, in their view, MAGA Republicans, and abortion rights were a big piece of this, right to choose, right for women to control their own bodies. All of that was really kind of wrapped up in their messaging. So I think it's going to be a big piece of how they lay out to voters. Now, whether voters respond to that, as you mentioned, there's so many other things going on in the world. Is this a voting issue? Is this the thing that drives people out? The politics of this have really flipped in the last year and a half. I spent most of my career covering politics, seeing the issue of abortion as a galvanizing issue on the right, because the feeling that Roe v. Wade was wrongly decided and the state should be able to decide, and then overnight the politics flipped. And last year, clearly Democrats did better than expected in the midterms, in large part because of the Dobbs ruling. And look, if the Ohio initiative passes tomorrow, which polling would suggest that it will, that's going to be another data point. If Governor Youngkin falls short in his effort to get full control of the legislature, that'll be another data point in that. And there are a lot of folks that are taking notes.
Yeah, no, I definitely think Virginia and the results tomorrow will show whether it has staying power. Now, it's still a year away from 2024, but I think tomorrow, because it is probably one of the biggest issues in the election in Virginia, we'll know whether it really carries a day for Democrats or not. I guess final question, the other contests on the ballot tomorrow, anything you'd like to say about the Kentucky governor, the Mississippi governor race?
Yeah, I mean, they're really interesting races. I think in Mississippi, you have a Democratic candidate who is, for all intents and purposes, pro-life. He also happens to be Elvis Presley's, I think, third cousin, and kind of runs as kind of a populist. And if there's any chance to get a Democrat in Mississippi, I think Brandon Presley is about as good as well suited as anyone. It's tough to beat an incumbent governor. The reverse of that is true in Kentucky, where the incumbent is a Democrat, Andy Beshear. I saw a story out today predicting that Beshear or the Republican, the Attorney General there, Cameron, that one of the two of them, whoever wins, is going to be on a national ticket at some point. They're both rising stars in their parties, and they're going to have a big ticket punched based on tomorrow's results. I think, look, for Democrats who are looking for a way to start to win again in places that have slipped away from them, it wasn't that long ago that Democrats controlled places like Kentucky and West Virginia. But it feels like a distant lifetime ago. And if Beshear is able to win a second
national candidates like Bill Clinton and Al Gore,
Mike Dukakis won West Virginia. It's changed really fast. But if you're a Democrat who's looking for the way forward, I think you could see in someone like Brandon Presley, if he wins, or more likely, I think Beshear is more likely to win than Presley. If Beshear wins, you'll want to know what he's doing, because he certainly speaks in a language of moderation, and he's not cozying up to Biden at all. I think the other side is trying to tie him to Biden, but he has governed as a pretty mainstream Democrat, not a conservative Democrat. He's been out, he's been clear that he thinks that there shouldn't be an abortion ban in the state. He's vetoed, trans-related bills that have come to his desk via Republicans. He's championed Medicaid reimbursement. He's he's in his mid-40s. He's someone that is, I think, going to be around a while. And if he's able to win and crack a code in Kentucky, people are going to want to know what he's doing.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you to Rick Klein for your great political coverage and your dedication to the facts. I also want to thank everyone tuning in for this important discussion. For the first time, thanks to support from people like you, our Festival of Facts, United Facts of America, is free to all guests, but you can still support Truth in Politics by donating to us to hold politicians accountable for their statements and to elevate informed civic engagement. Visit PolitiFact.com/donate to make a donation today. As a reminder, we continue at 11 a.m. Eastern Time when Dr. Celine Gounder will join us to discuss anti-vaccination conspiracy theories and other topics. And make sure you join us Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern as we take you behind the scenes as we prep for the next GOP presidential debate. See how we get ready, learn what we're looking for, and hear more about our partnership with ABC News and 538. That's 7:30 p.m. Wednesday, right before the 9 p.m. debate in Miami. Until then, take care.
Thank you.